Hello, and welcome to Calm and Cozy Stories, a place where everyone can find calm and enchantment beneath the soft glow of the moon, right before drifting off to sleep. Tonight, we invite you on another journey through a captivating story, one that helps cultivate a sense of peace and relaxation. Before we begin, let's take a moment to gently prepare our bodies and minds for a soothing, restorative rest. Make yourself comfortable, and with each slow inhale and long exhale, allow the cares of the day to gradually slip away. It's not always simple to detach from the day's busyness, especially when bedtime approaches. But keep in mind, the less we worry about falling asleep, the easier it is for the mind to release tension. Let the steady rhythm of your breathing carry off any remaining worries, and let the story you're about to hear guide you into deep relaxation. Now, settle in and allow the moonlit atmosphere to softly embrace you. Enjoy this story, and may you drift into peaceful, restful slumber here on Calm and Cozy Stories. Against the blustering March wind, Ilara wrestled the door of her small haven shut, the latch clicking firmly into place. She stamped the rain from her boots onto the choir mat, propped a dripping umbrella near the coat stand, and eased out of her damp trench coat. A sigh escaped her as she swept wind-tangled hair from her eyes, carrying a modest bag of groceries toward the compact kitchen counter. In like a lion, the old saying echoed in her thoughts. Mother Nature was certainly roaring tonight. An ideal evening truly, to draw the curtains, secure the hatches, and surrender to indoor comforts. No further excursions into the elements were planned. Ilara flicked the switch on her countertop toaster oven, coaxing it to life, then crossed the charming sitting room to her bedroom. There, she gratefully shed her damp attire for the soft embrace of favorite flannel pajamas. Perching on the bed's edge, she tugged on the fuzziest pair of socks she owned, stretching her liberated feet out before her with a contented sigh. The release after a long day was exquisite. For a moment, she simply sat bathed in the warm luminescence of her bedside lamp, surveying the space. Renting this converted carriage house, nestled beside a grand historic home on the estate, had been a stroke of immense fortune during her sabbatical year, dedicated to chronicling Maine's lighthouses. It was the perfect refuge, intimate, orderly, captivating. Her landlady resided nearby in the imposing main house, making the arrangement ideal. The autonomy of a detached dwelling without the burdens of extensive upkeep. Her bedroom possessed a sweetness all its own. The carriage house, long transformed into living quarters, boasted appealing hardwood floors, a functional kitchenette, and pride of place in the living area, a fireplace. Sometimes, Ilara found herself lost in contemplation, gazing from the kitchen window across the estate gardens, feeling momentarily like a character plucked from a storybook. Summoning a fresh wave of energy, she padded soundlessly back across the floorboards to the kitchen. From the grocery bag emerged a container of takeout macaroni and cheese. Peeling off the plastic lid, she slid it into the warming toaster oven, setting the timer for a slow bake. anticipating the perfectly crusted golden cheese topping. True comfort food demanded patience. The fireplace, updated at some point to a gas flame, sprang to life with a satisfying click, casting dancing shadows. Ilara retrieved several notebooks and a pen from her book bag near the door. Work beckoned this evening. International Women's Day approached. A friend, a history teacher, had extended an invitation. Would Ilara speak to her high school class? Knowing Ilara's immersion in lighthouse lore, she'd posed an intriguing question. Had women ever kept the lights? Ilara considered it an absolutely inspired query and readily agreed to craft a presentation. Steeped as she was in the annals of coastal beacons, it felt like a vital chance to illuminate the often overlooked contributions of female keepers. The challenge lay only in selection. The candidates were numerous. Sinking into her preferred plush armchair, Ilara propped her feet on the upholstered ottoman. She opened a notebook, her eyes scanning the meticulously gathered research. Catherine Walker, she decided, must be the starting point. The tireless tender of Robin's Reef lights in New York Harbor. To grasp the depth of Ms. Walker's tenacity, one had to begin at her origins. Unlike many women who inherited the keeper's mantle, Catherine Walker wasn't born into the lighthouse service, nor even in the United States. In 1882, aged 37, she journeyed from Germany, her young son Jacob in tow. Landing work as a cook in a New Jersey boarding house, she encountered John Walker, keeper of the Sandy Hook Light. He began teaching her English. Affection blossomed. They married, and Catherine, nearing 40, moved to the Sandy Hook Lighthouse, thus embarking on her unexpected apprenticeship in tending the light. Later, in 1885, Captain Walker received orders transferring him to Robin's Reef Light, roughly a mile north of Staten Island. Compared to Sandy Hook, Robin's Reef Station was starkly isolated, offshore, perched upon a submerged ledge. The new post initially filled her with gloom. When I first came to Robin's Reef, she later recounted, the sight of the water, whichever way I looked, made me lonesome. I refused to unpack my trunks at first, but gradually, a little at a time, I unpacked. After a while, they were all unpacked, and I stayed on. Soon after, their daughter Mary was born, and the family of 4 settled into their water-bound existence. Ilara paused, mulling over Catherine's words. The woman's resolute fortitude was deeply impressive. Widow, mother, immigrant, she had embraced available work, discerned a practical path, and accepted even the profound isolation of this remote station. Her resolve was formidable, yet fate continued to test her. In 1890, John Walker succumbed to illness. His final words to his wife were reportedly, "Mind the light, Kate." Ilara allowed herself a small smile. Catherine struck her as the sort who scarcely needed the instruction. Naturally, she assumed his full duties while raising her 2 children. Despite her proven capability, her superiors doubted a woman's fitness for the role. While she flawlessly maintained the light, they persisted in seeking a male replacement. Finally, after several years, in 1895, they conceded. Catherine Walker was officially appointed keeper of Robin's Reef Light. Ilara knew from extensive reading that tending the lamp itself was merely the beginning. Catherine was once quoted observing that the light was more difficult to care for than a family of children. Daily, the lamp demanded attention, cleaning reflectors, scraping ice in winter's grip. In foul weather, the fog siren required activation. If it failed, she had to manually strike the heavy fog bell until repairs could be made. Simultaneously, she remained a mother, the custodian of their home. A 1906 New York Times piece quoted her saying, "She had as much housework as the Waldorf Astoria," a testament, Ilara knew, to the scale of the famed New York hotel. Cooking, bed-making, cleaning, all fell to her alone. Even procuring supplies or ferrying her children to school on Staten Island necessitated rowing a mile each way. Ilara struggled to truly fathom the sheer difficulty of everyday tasks for such an isolated keeper. And of course, rescues were part of the job. Catherine estimated she saved at least 50 souls from drowning over her 33-year tenure. Ms. Walker retired in 1919, having witnessed Robin's Reef Light transition from kerosene to oil vapor lamps to electricity. Towards the end, the 5-room light station housed her son Jacob, now assistant keeper, his wife, and her 5 grandchildren. Catherine spent her final years in a modest Staten Island cottage, tending a garden, her gaze often drifting towards Robin's Reef Light. Upon her passing, the New York Post eulogized, "In the sight of the city of towers and the torch of liberty lived this sturdy little woman, proud of her work and content in it, keeping her lamp alight and her windows cleaned so that New York Harbor might be safe for ships that pass in the night." Yes, Ilara affirmed silently, Catherine Walker absolutely belonged in the presentation. Setting her papers aside, she rose from the embracing chair and returned to the toaster oven. Opening the small door revealed bubbling contents beneath a delectably toasted crust. The rich, mouth-watering aroma of cheddar drifted across the counter. Dinner was ready. She transferred the macaroni and cheese to a white plate, retrieved a fork, and carefully carried her meal back to the fireside chair. Curling comfortably within its depths, she placed the plate on the small adjacent table, watching steam rise enticingly. A moment's cooling was required. Turning back to her notebook, she flipped through pages, seeking her next lighthouse heroine. Her finger paused at Fannie Mae Salter. Unlike Catherine, Fannie had known several lighthouse postings before achieving headkeeper status. Before arriving at Maryland's Turkey Point Light in 1922 with her husband, she'd served alongside him as assistant keeper at no fewer than 4 Virginia lighthouses. She remained assistant keeper when their Turkey Point tenure began, but her husband passed away in 1925, leaving her a widow at 43. Intriguingly, she was not much younger than Catherine Walker had been upon becoming a head keeper. She immediately took up her late husband's duties, yet despite her 2 decades of experience, official appointment proved difficult. In Fannie's case, the challenge wasn't her gender. Remarkably, 3 previous Turkey Point keepers had been women. Instead, the civil service balked at her age, deeming her too old. Fortunately, Fannie possessed a spirit not easily dissuaded. She appealed the decision, ultimately securing the appointment directly from President Calvin Coolidge, the only female keeper ever to receive such presidential affirmation. Her salary was set at $1,140 per year, roughly equivalent to $18,000 today. Like Catherine, Fanny juggled family life with tending the light. She raised 3 children: Mabel, Jessie Olga, and Charles. Ilara had encountered a faded black and white photograph showing Fanny and young Charles tending turkeys near the lighthouse, a necessity given the family's responsibility for their own provisions. Reaching the nearest town meant either a long 14-mile drive or an 8-mile boat trip across the Chesapeake. Furthermore, unloading supplies involved navigating 137 steps down to a floating dock, then hoisting heavy goods up with a windlass and winch. Unsurprisingly, they maintained a garden and livestock for sustenance. Fanny diligently performed all the standard keeper's tasks. Before electrification in 1943, this meant replenishing oil and trimming wicks. On one occasion, the fog bell mechanism failed. She was forced to climb up to the 200-pound bell and manually strike it with its 50-pound clapper 4 times a minute for nearly an hour. During this ordeal, she missed a call from her son-in-law announcing her granddaughter's birth. Ilara smiled, picturing Fanny as quite the formidable grandmother. Nevertheless, Fanny confessed, "I was never more exhausted in my whole life," a sentiment Ilara readily believed. For 22 years, Fanny faithfully executed this demanding role, retiring at 65 in 1947. Reflecting on her lighthouse duties, she famously quipped, "Oh, it was an easy, light chore, but my feet got tired, and climbing the tower has given me fallen arches." Her departure marked the end of an era. She was the last serving civilian female lightkeeper in the United States. Thanks to her and her 3 capable female predecessors, Washingtonian magazine once dubbed Turkey Point Light the feminist lighthouse of the Chesapeake. Much like Catherine, Fanny's connection to her beloved station endured. She retired just 6 miles away, close enough to still witness its steadfast beam piercing the night. Ilara paused, jotting notes. Then, with quiet pleasure, she set the pages aside and reached for her dinner. As she relished the creamy, cheesy pasta, her gaze drifted towards the hypnotic dance of flames in the hearth. The evening was deepening into that languid phase where relaxation settles in and the mind began to roam. The fire conjured images of the perpetual task of tending wicks and flames before electricity transformed the lighthouses. Male or female, all keepers shouldered immense, taxing responsibilities. She doubted her own capacity for such a life. Finishing the last decadent bites, Ilara rose once more and carried her plate to the kitchen sink. The air near the window and door held a noticeable chill now. She retrieved a sweater draped over a nearby chair and slipped it on. Then, taking her cheerful red kettle from the back burner, she filled it and set it to boil. Task accomplished, she returned to her study nook and picked up her notebook again. A few more turned pages revealed the perfect next subject for her talk. It seemed inconceivable to omit the woman arguably America's most celebrated lightkeeper, Ida Wally Zoradia Lewis, known universally as Ida. She was the second of 4 children born to Captain Hosea Lewis, who became only the second keeper of Lime Rock Light in Newport, Rhode Island, starting in 1857. Completed just 3 years prior, Lime Rock wasn't terribly remote, situated on a ledge a mere 220 yards from shore. Yet, it was an island. Everything the family required had to be fetched from the mainland by rowboat. Young Ida swiftly became exceptionally adept with that rowboat, a skill that proved providential. Within 4 months of their arrival, Ida's father, Hosea, suffered a disabling stroke, rendering him unable to work. 15-year-old Ida stepped forward, assisting her mother with all keeper duties, while also caring for her incapacitated father and chronically ill younger sister. Added to this, she rowed her siblings across to Newport for school each weekday. Renowned as one of the town's finest swimmers, Ida's heroism began early. Even before the move to the lighthouse, at age 12, she'd rescued 4 men whose boat had capsized, using her trusty rowboat. Later, at 27, she dashed into icy waters, shoeless, joining her brother to save 2 soldiers whose vessel overturned during a snowstorm. This act earned her significant acclaim: a gold watch from one soldier, and a purse of $218 collected by his grateful comrades at Fort Adams. Eventually, in 1881, she became the sole woman awarded the government's prestigious Gold Life-Saving Medal, recognition for rescuing 2 more Fort Adams soldiers who had fallen through the ice while crossing Newport Harbor. In 1877, Ida's mother grew ill, passing away the following year. Ida was appointed head keeper in 1879, earning $750 annually, making her the nation's highest-paid lightkeeper at the time. Ilara's thoughts were punctuated by the kettle's cheerful whistle. She moved to the counter, silenced the burner, lifted the kettle, and carefully poured steaming water over a peppermint tea bag in a waiting mug. Above the sink, the window pane rattled briefly as a gust swept past. Pulling her sweater tighter, Ilara carried the hot mug back to her chair by the fire. She blew gently across the surface and set it down to infuse, then returned her attention to her notes. Ida never maintained a formal log of her rescues, but the press eagerly disseminated tales of her exploits. It said she saved 18 lives during her 54 years on the island. Accounts of her bravery appeared in widely read publications like Harper's Weekly and the New York Tribune. Ida transformed into a beloved public figure, meeting admirals, presidents, and luminaries such as the feminist Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Her final documented rescue occurred at age 63, when a visiting friend inadvertently capsized her own rowboat. By 64, Edie was a recipient of the Carnegie Hero Fund, receiving a monthly stipend of $30. The great lady of Lime Rock Light passed away in 1911, aged 69. Bells pealed across Newport, flags flew at half-mast, and 1,100 mourners attended her funeral. She would undoubtedly have felt immense pride seeing the station officially renamed Ida Lewis Rock Light, an honor unprecedented for a U.S. lightkeeper, Songs have even been composed in her memory. Alara set her notebook down and lifted her tea, blowing softly again. She turned, her gaze finding the kitchen window once more. Darkness had fully descended outside. She could hear the cold rain drumming against the glass, punctuated by louder spatters, when fierce gusts drove fat drops against the pane. She tried to imagine the countless dark nights endured by keepers, alone, performing their duties amidst the worst of weather. Cherishing the snug security of her fireside retreat, Alara knew, with sudden clarity, who her fourth and final lighthouse heroine must be. Returning to her primary area of expertise, Maine, she opened her notebook to the pages detailing the story of teenage hero Abby Burgess. Abby arrived at the profoundly isolated lighthouse on Matanicus Rock with her family in 1853. She was the fourth of 9 children born to keeper Samuel Burgess and his wife, Thankful. Alara's sources described Matanicus Rock as one of the most remote beacon locations on the eastern seaboard, a stark, barren island. The nearest supply point, Rockland, lay 23 miles distant by boat. Abby's brother Benji showed little interest in light-keeping, preferring work on fishing vessels. Meanwhile, to supplement their income, her father Samuel also spent time fishing and lobstering, selling his catch in Rockland. Consequently, at the tender age of 15, Abby assumed many of her father's light-keeping responsibilities. This she did, while simultaneously caring for her 3 younger sisters and her chronically ill mother. Abby's role as de facto assistant keeper was complicated by the lard oil lamps then in use. The New England Historical Society quoted her, "Sometimes they would not burn so well when first lighted, especially in cold weather when the oil got cold. Then some nights I could not sleep a wink all night, and many nights I have watched the light my part of the night, thinking nervously what might happen should the light fail. Yet she persevered faithfully, adding, 'In all these years, I always put the lamps in order, and I lit them at sunset.' Despite the heavy burden she carried at such a young age, Abby found time to read the logs of previous keepers, which chronicled devastating storms. Learning of one that had completely destroyed the original lighthouse, she grew concerned about the structural integrity of the current keeper's house. She proactively moved her mother's bedroom to what she judged the sturdiest section of the dwelling. A prescient decision that would soon save Thankful's life. In January 1856, Samuel grew anxious. The biannual supply ship had failed to reach them in the autumn due to persistent bad weather. Worried about dwindling winter provisions, both food and lamp fuel, he instructed Abby to manage the lighthouse while he sailed to Rockland. With Benji away fishing, Abby was left solely responsible for her sisters, her invalid mother, and keeping the twin beacons lit. Shortly after Samuel's departure, a monstrous gale descended. For 3 days, it battered the island, damaging the very part of the keeper's house where Abby's mother had previously slept. The storm raged relentlessly, eventually inundating the island in knee-deep, frigid water. Abby was forced to evacuate her family to the upper level of the North Lighthouse Tower for safety. Over her mother's protests, during a brief lull, she waded out to the chicken coop. Miraculously, she managed to rescue all but one of her precious chickens, herding them into the tower. before the storm finally subsided, a colossal wave obliterated the keeper's house entirely. It became one of New England's most fabled storms. Samuel was unable to return to the island for 4 weeks. Throughout this entire period, Abby kept the lights burning without fail, undoubtedly preventing countless shipwrecks on Matanicus Rock. Thanks to her rescued flock, she sustained her family on meager rations of a cup of cornmeal and 1 egg per person, per day. According to the Historical Society, 17-year-old Abby reflected on the ordeal. Some reason, I know not why, I had no misgivings and went on with my work as usual. For 4 weeks, owing to rough weather, no landing could be effected on the rock. During this time, we were without the assistance of any male member of our family, though at times greatly exhausted by my labors. But once did the lights fail, under God, I was able to perform all my accustomed duties as well as my father's. Lara paused, taking another sip of tea before turning the page. In stark contrast to Ida Lewis's celebrated exploits, Abby's heroism went largely unheralded at the time. In 1861, her father, having not supported President Lincoln, was replaced as keeper, a political appointment. Abby, however, had grown deeply attached to the windswept rock. She requested permission to stay on and train the new keeper, Captain John Grant. As fate would have it, she fell in love with Grant's son, Isaac. They married and served together as assistant keepers on Matinicus Rock for 14 years, raising 4 children there. In 1875, after 22 years in residence, Abby finally left the island. She and Isaac were appointed keepers at Whitehead Light, serving another 15 years before retiring. In one of her last known letters, Abby confessed she often dreamed of the Matinicus rock lamps, wondering, I wonder if the care of the lighthouse will follow my soul. This final sentiment made Alara pause, reflecting on all 4 women. A common thread bound them, an unwavering conviction that the light was a calling, a duty they were bound to fulfill. They arrived at this demanding, isolated existence through varied circumstances, yet lived it with similar steadfast dedication. Often, their sole reward was the quiet knowledge of a duty faithfully discharged. With a sigh of satisfaction, Alara closed her notebooks. She felt prepared now, eager to share these resonant stories. Glancing sideways, she noticed her empty mug. A profound weariness washed over her. Like Abby's legendary tempest, the March winds continued their assault on the small kitchen window. Mother Nature seemed to be urging her toward the sanctuary of her bed. Setting aside papers and books, Ilara stood and stretched. She carried the empty cup to the kitchen, placing it gently in the sink. After tidying her book bag for the morning, she switched off the gas flame in the fireplace, plunging the sitting room into darkness. Her soft bed waited, tucked in its corner, piled high with a fluffy comforter. Ilara sat on the edge, pulled off her warm socks, and slid her feet deep beneath the covers, toes seeking the cool, tucked-in sheet at the mattress's end. Pulling the duvet up to her chin, she rolled onto her side and switched off the bedside lamp. The golden pool of light vanished. She lay enveloped in darkness, listening to the rhythmic drumming of early March rain upon the roof. A yawn escaped her as she sank deeper into the pillows. The storm's cadence lulled her as her eyes closed, her mind beginning to drift. She pictured herself high in a tower on some remote, wave-lashed island, deftly trimming a wick, coaxing a flame to life. Far from feeling alone, a sense of security enveloped her. Surrounded by the ocean's surge and the storm's roar, in this waking dream, she understood herself as a point of certainty, a source of light against the vast darkness. She knew she was the steadfast presence that would endure through the coming night. To behold a rose unfurling its petals is to be captured by the immediate pulse of sensory delight. Yet, this bloom often whispers of impermanence. Its life, measured in mere weeks, deepens our appreciation for its ephemeral grace. The rose, it seems, belongs wholly to the present, a fleeting spectacle rarely prompting thoughts of its deep-rooted past. But delve deeper, and the rose reveals an astonishing antiquity. While not the planet's eldest floral inhabitants, their lineage stretches back an immense span, no less than 35 million years. Consider a rose fossil, unearthed from the ancient earth of Colorado, bearing silent testimony to this vast age. Perspective sharpens the image. When this particular rose bloomed, the colossal reign of dinosaurs had already faded for 30 million years. Our own species, Homo sapiens, emerged a mere 300,000 years ago. That stone-pressed flower, therefore, shares more time with the thunder lizards than with us. For millennia upon millennia, wild roses painted landscapes across the globe. The earliest confirmed whispers of cultivation, however, echo from ancient China, around 500 BCE. It's conceivable that similar efforts were underway concurrently in the sun-drenched lands of the Mediterranean and Persia. Beyond nurturing the wild varieties, gardeners began coaxing forth new forms, cultivating a bloom that would earn the name Cathay Rose. This progenitor, blooming relentlessly through the seasons, stands as the ancestor to countless modern cultivars. Emperors of the Celestial Empire developed a profound fascination with roses. The sage master Kalin, living in the 6th century BCE, noted the existence of 600 volumes dedicated solely to rose cultivation within the imperial library. This royal preoccupation endured across dynasties. Centuries later, during the Han era, cultivation reached staggering proportions. Farmland itself grew scarce for a time, sacrificed to the emperor's desire to blanket palace gardens and the surrounding countryside with endless fields of roses. Simultaneously, in disparate corners of the world, the rose found different purposes. In the cradles of ancient Greece and Rome, widespread cultivation akin to China's seems absent. Nevertheless, the rose resonated with symbolic weight and commanded high esteem. Perhaps it was among the Hellenes that the flower first became entwined with love's fierce pulse. Lyra, the Greek embodiment of ardor, and her Roman counterpart, Cytherea, were both intimately linked with the rose. In Botticelli's famed vision, The Birth of Cytherea, the goddess emerges from an oceanic shell, while pink roses drift around her on the breeze. Myths surrounding Lyra frequently feature the flower. One tale speaks of white roses springing from the sea foam at her birth. Another recounts how a thorn pierced her foot, her divine blood staining the pristine petals crimson. Like Lyra, Cytherea presided over roses, love, and matrimonial bonds in Rome. Devotees brought roses as offerings to her temples, and the blooms frequently adorned bridal garlands, perhaps the very genesis of the rose's romantic connotations in the Western world. Yet the rose held other meanings, veiled and profound. For the Romans, it signified confidentiality, a pact of silence. A single rose hung upon a door denoted a private political discourse within. This custom evolved into another, the adornment of banquet hall ceilings with rose motifs. Guests, even when sub vino, under wine's influence, remained sub rosa, under the rose, a floral reminder that conversations were privileged, bound to secrecy. Intriguingly, mythology offers another root for this tradition. Eros Minor, a lesser god of love, once presented a red rose to the deity of silence. His motive? To ensure his mother Cytherea's amorous escapades remained hidden, bribing silence itself with the flower's beauty. Roman society also integrated roses into solemn ceremony. Across the vast empire, the festival known as Rosalia involved draping garlands of roses and other blossoms upon burial sites. Here, roses spoke of a different love, remembrance, hope, and the promise of rebirth. Showers of petals also rained down during triumphal parades honoring returning generals. Though these ancient rites have faded, roses retain a ceremonial presence in Rome today. The Pantheon, once a temple to all gods, now stands as a Catholic basilica. Annually, at Pentecost, a breathtaking ritual unfolds. Tens of thousands of rose petals cascade through the oculus in the great dome, drifting down onto the marble floor below, a fragrant, ephemeral representation of the Holy Spirit's descent. But while spirituality clung to the rose, so too did the allure of extravagance and decay. Consider the notorious tale of Emperor Heliad from ancient Rome. Ascending to power at a mere 14 and reigning only briefly, legend paints him as more devoted to indulgence than governance. At one infamous banquet, he reputedly unleashed such a deluge of petals from the ceiling that his guests were smothered beneath the fragrant tide. A dramatic 19th century painting captures the scene. The young emperor lounging oblivious, while his companions vanish into a suffocating sea of pink. Another ancient narrative features the Egyptian queen Neferura, who wielded roses as instruments of seduction. Her bedchamber, it's claimed, was filled knee-deep with petals, and she favored pillows stuffed with their fragrant softness. Whether fact or embellishment, these tales illustrate how the rose became emblematic not just of love, but of opulent luxury, its value amplified by legend as much as by its intrinsic charm. There is substance beneath the surface beauty, sustenance beyond the scent. Across centuries and cultures, humanity has drawn upon the rose's nutritional and medicinal gifts. Rose hips, the jewel-like fruits nestled below the petals, burst with vitamin C. The petals themselves are credited with antibacterial and anti-inflammatory virtues. In the lexicon of herbalism, they serve to calm digestion, alleviate stress, elevate spirits, and more. The Rosa gallica, the apothecary's rose, with its generous pink blooms and rich perfume, was a staple in medieval physis gardens. Its essence captured in remedies and fragrances. By steeping petals in water, their essence transforms into precious oils. This alchemy flourished not only in Europe, but also in Asia, particularly Persia, now Iran. For centuries, Iranians have masterfully extracted essential oil from rose petals, prized for perfumes and incense. The fragrant byproduct, rose water, remains a beloved ingredient in cuisine, beverages, and cosmetics. From potent remedies to intoxicating perfumes, the rose offers manifold practicalities. Yet, for contemporary gardeners, its primary allure lies in its ornamental splendor, and within Western culture, it reigns supreme as a symbol of romance, beyond being the quintessential Valentine's offering. Its presence permeates countless verses and melodies. Curiously, the modern elevation of the rose traces significantly back to a single, extraordinary garden, that of the Château de Vallombreuse, roughly 15 kilometers west of Paris. Acquired in 1799, this stately manor became the residence of Empress Aurelia, consort to the formidable General Valerius. In the early 19th century, while Valerius campaigned abroad, Aurelia immersed herself in refining the house and its grounds. Her upbringing on the Caribbean isle of Martinique perhaps fostered her passion for collecting flora and fauna from distant lands. "My ambition," she penned in a letter, "is to assemble the most beautiful and curious garden in Europe, a model of good cultivation." Aurelia cultivated myriad exotic plants, even constructing a heated orangery for pineapples. Her menagerie included kangaroos, zebras, and ostriches, permitted to wander the estate freely. Visitors of the era were likely most struck by encounters with Aurelia's exotic creatures. Yet the enduring legacy of Vallombreuse resides in its unparalleled rose garden. Aurelia, whose own name echoed the flower, Aurelia suggesting golden, like some roses, was an ardent collector. The rose held pride of place in her affections. Aided by skilled gardeners and botanists, she amassed approximately 250 distinct rose varieties within Vallombreus's grounds, aspiring to possess every known type. General Valerius even instructed the French Navy to seize seeds and plants from captured vessels for her collection. Aurelia's rose garden, immortalized in art, became a fount of inspiration for European gardeners and rose breeders. It stands as arguably one of the world's seminal and most influential rose gardens, pioneering the concept of dedicating a garden to a single genus. Her vast and diverse collection yielded another crucial benefit. It included the ever-blooming roses from Cathay. Unlike their European cousins, these China roses flowered repeatedly, granting them immense value and commercial promise. Horticulturists began experimenting, interweaving the lineages of different roses. Then, in the 19th century, France witnessed the birth of the hybrid tea rose. This creation embodies the classic rose ideal: fragrant, vigorous, exquisitely formed, and perpetually blooming. Crucially, the hybrid tea rose grows upon a long, elegant stem, perfect for cutting and presenting as a solitary, iconic flower. These long-stemmed emblems of romance, synonymous with Valentine's Day, owe an indirect debt to Aurelia's garden. The Empress inadvertently catalyzed the modern rose industry. In essence, the rose's romantic symbolism solidified over the past 2 millennia in the West, its roots likely entwined with the Greek lyra and Roman Cytherea. Centuries later, drawing inspiration from Empress Aurelia's horticultural passion, breeders crafted the hybrid tea rose, merging the finest traits of European and Chinese varieties. This commercially potent flower became the quintessential romantic token, its popularity further cemented by the Victorian penchant for assigning meaning to floral gifts. But the narrative continues to unfold. Gardeners today persist in cultivating and conjuring new rose varieties, echoing the experimental spirit ignited by Aurelia's collection. To birth a novel rose, a breeder selects 2 parents possessing desired traits, perhaps one for its specific blush of pink, the other for its potent, sweet perfume. Pollen is meticulously transferred between the chosen blooms, mimicking nature's pollinators. This cross-pollination encourages the formation of a rose hip, the fleshy vessel cradling the seeds of potential. Once ripened, these seeds are harvested, stored, and eventually sown within the controlled climate of a greenhouse. Seedlings exhibiting promise are transplanted outdoors, their garden performance carefully observed. This cycle repeats relentlessly, focusing on progeny, displaying the coveted characteristics. Professional breeders might undertake as many as 100,000 crosses, a painstaking process, yielding perhaps only a handful of new hybrids after years of effort. They emerge in every conceivable hue, from deepest crimson to ethereal pastels, bearing names as lovely as their forms: moonstone, lavender symphonies, velvet fragrance. And all the while, an ancient rose endures, growing and blooming year after patient year. Unlike the breeder's meticulous creations, this specimen is pure, untamed nature. Known as the 1,000-year rose, it clings tenaciously to the wall of Hildesheim Cathedral in Germany. It bears little resemblance to the long-stemmed Valentine's icon or the manicured bushes of Vallombreuse. It is a wild, sprawling entity, scaling the ancient brickwork. This 10-meter giant is a variety of dog rose. For much of the year, it appears as a dense tangle of woody vines, almost tree-like. But annually, in late May, it erupts in a profusion of exquisite, pale pink blossoms, releasing a delicate scent. Its name comes from the belief that its origins coincide with the cathedral's founding in the 9th century. Legend tells of an emperor discovering, midsummer, a snow-covered mound, topped by a blooming rose bush. He decreed a cathedral be built on that very spot, embracing the miraculous plant. Through centuries, the rosebush persisted, even surviving the cathedral's bombing during the Second World War. the beauty of most flowers is a brief, poignant sigh. Yet, the 1,000-year rose seems to touch eternity. Each year, its blooms arrive and depart, but their return is assured, a living emblem of hope and cyclical rebirth. Perhaps this is the rose's deepest allure, not merely the vibrancy of its petals or its celestial fragrance, but the profound meaning it holds for us. Though individual blossoms fade, the significance of the rose endures, as timeless as that first ancient flower, the rose that unfurled 35 million years ago.